Excellent. Let's begin. I'm going to have to grab my copy after the game. Speedrun day 18,000. We are over 2,100. Let us begin. Okay, Mr. NWA. Oh, he's a sub to my channel. Okay, let's go d4. I've mostly been playing e4, but I do want to play d4 in this turn. By the way, is the audio quality okay? I'm not using my mic right now. If it's grainy, then I'll bring my mic. Okay, it's fine. Okay, so c4. And he is playing the King's Indian defense. Ladies and gentlemen, we are playing now against the King's Indian. Okay. So what do I recommend to players in the 2100 rating range against the King's Indian? I recommend the same-ish variation. And to those of you who are not familiar with it, I will explain it in detail after the game. The same-ish is denoted by the move f3. What is the idea of f3? Well, you guys might have seen this move before in the Sicilian. What is the idea? Who can tell me what White's next move is? Andrew Tang, by the way, is a specialist in this line. Well, we're cementing the pawn on e4. What move do we follow this up with? So, well, we don't play d5. That's a little premature. What we do, we develop our bishop to e3. Yes, h4 is ultimately going to be the idea. The same-ish is the only line in the King's Indian where White usually castles queenside. Now, you could castle queenside in other lines, but in this line, that is sort of the mainline theory. So typically, we play f3 for two reasons. We cement our central control. Number two, we stop him from harassing our bishop with knight g4. That's very important. Knight g4, as you guys know, can be a very nasty move in these positions. And we don't want to give away this bishop unless it's for this bishop. So what our opponent has done is gotten kind of an accelerated dragon-type structure. And this is not the best way to respond against the same-ish. Now White is just solidly better. I've got now a positional advantage on top of my tactical advantage. So how should we continue? Yeah, queen d2 is good here. We could have also dropped our knight back to c2 to prevent the trade, but the trade isn't bad for us. And one very important decision that, as White, we're going to have to make here, I've talked many times about flexibility. What you have to be able to do at a high level is begin the game with one plan, but stop on a dime and shoot a three-pointer. You were planning to make a layup. Now you're going to shoot a three-pointer. What that translates to is the ability to, let's say, castle short and say, you know what? Now we have a positional advantage. We're not going to go for the immediate checkmate move. But rook e8 is a bit of an empty move. And because rook e8 is a bit of an empty move, I'm going to allow myself to castle long. And we're making our intentions perfectly clear. I am going to go for his throat in very conventional fashion. h4, h5. Open up that h-file and go for checkmate. We've done this before in openings such as the perk. Okay, let's go. There's no need to delay. Let's go h4. We're, of course, going to sacrifice that pawn. That's the whole point of this attack. Is he... Well, okay. What would be the Russian school of chess move in this kind of position? Who can tell me what the Russian school of chess move would be? So the Russian school of chess would be king b1, right? King b1, as many of you guys know, is a very healthy move to play in positions where you've castled long. Why do you play it? You play it, and let's actually play it. You play it because this king is just a lot safer on the b file. If black puts a rook on c8, you guys can see how if the king remains... Well, there we go. Profit. If only we had a profit emote. Okay, now I will assure you that the attack will proceed a lot more smoothly now that the king is safe. The king is not globally safe. It's just that we've bought ourselves some time. It's harder to get to this king. And we're going to have more time ourselves for the orchestration of the kingside attack. Now, we've got to be very careful here. What should we do? Who can tell me the move here? So there's a little bit of a wrinkle here. Because if we go g4 and we say, get the hell out of h5, where can the knight go? Black has a very nasty response to that. Black is a very nasty... Yeah, knight g3 is very nasty because it attacks the rook and he might take the bishop. So in the spirit of preparing slowly and attacking fast, here's what we're going to do. We're going to drop our knight back to b3. Basically, I'm reducing the tension on the d4 square. I'll explain this in more detail after the game. I'm forcing the queen to move. And depending on where the queen moves, I'm either going to proactively defend the g3 square to prepare g4, or if the queen moves to, if the queen moves elsewhere, we might even sacrifice the exchange on h5, or we might go bishop h6. I don't know if this move makes sense to people. What we're essentially doing is eliminating this tension on the d4 square so that we can, as they say in Russian, untie our hands to attack with in more single-minded fashion on the king side, right? We don't have to worry about all these trades. Let's see where he goes. Also, we're forcing... Robert lost? That sucks. I mean, Robert and I, partners in crime, and we've experienced some pain in this tournament. Damn. That's very sad. Robert and I are going to cry together. Okay, so if he takes on c3, then we take back. And we've eliminated his most important piece. Even at the cost of our pawn structure, that's more than worth it. But let's focus on the game, guys. So, yeah, playing on both sides of the board. So is everything I'm doing so far making sense? There's a lot going on in this position. I know that some of you guys are feeling a little bit overwhelmed. So much going on. We've sacrificed a pawn. But fundamentally, the battle is revolving around who checkmates which side first, right? We're going on the king side. Our opponent's going on the queen side. There's nothing mysterious about that, nor should there be. And this gets my alarm bells going, because one thing that people forget to do, just because a move didn't work at some point doesn't mean it doesn't work now. So let's consider the move g4. g4, knight g3. But because the queen has repositioned itself to the center, where it's maximally vulnerable, what move becomes possible after g4, knight g3? Bingo! Stefan Selmart chess. Bishop f4 forks the queen and the knight. Now, it's sort of a fake fork, because he can take on f1 and attack our queen. But remember, what was our initial goal? Our initial goal wasn't to win anything. It was just to get rid of that knight so that we could, again, untie our hands so that we can finally reposition our own queen to the h-file and deliver checkmate along h2. We are a lot closer to our goal than our opponent is to doing anything to our queen side. Our queen side is still completely intact. And aren't you guys thankful that we got our king away from that c-file so we don't have to worry about any of that crap? Now... here comes queen h2. Here's Johnny. And now it's big time trouble for black, because queen takes h7. While that's not checkmate immediately, it's going to be checkmate in just a couple moves. So black does have ways of staving off the mate. But in my estimation, we have so many pieces now geared toward the king side. We're going to mate him in a couple of moves here. Black can hold out for a little bit, but he's busted. And also the queen is very bad here. It's just stuck in the middle of nowhere. Okay, now there's a very, very typical idea I want everybody to remember. Queen h8 would be checkmate, but wait a minute, it's not checkmate because there's a bishop here. Next question in our mind, can we get rid of that bishop? Yes, we can. We can go bishop h6, and queen h8 is still checkmate because of the pin. Simple attacking game, and he didn't even touch our king. Our pawn structure remained completely intact. I didn't even play this perfectly. I think I made a couple inaccuracies, but it was good enough to win. So, the same-ish with f3, right? When was this move first played? I like to give you guys a little context as to when these moves were first played to give you a little historical knowledge. Remember that the King's Indian didn't really gain prominence until the 1920s, 30s, when the hypermodernists came around. People did experiment with it in the 1800s, but they were mostly laughed at. It was first played in the year 1925 by Samish. So the Samish is one of those openings which is actually named for the guy who played it first. Friedrich Samish, I think he was Austrian, grandmaster in later life, very strong player, one of the leading players in the world, really, in the 20s, 30s, 40s. And he played it twice, in 1925 and 1926. And then, and then it was played throughout the 20s, 30s. It gained prominence very, very quickly. Samish played a lot of Samishes. Wait, I'm not showing anything. No, I'm just talking about it, guys. Guys, relax. I'm just talking about it. I'm not actually showing any moves. I was just saying when it was first played. So just to recap, what is the idea of the Samish? Two ideas. Number one, we protect the pawn on e4. Remember what I said about playing against openings such as the King's Indian. It's not about the amount of the center that you control. It's about how well you control it. So it's very important to make sure that our central pawns are well protected by our pieces and other pawns. So that's why we play these two moves. Our bishop protects the d pawn, our pawn protects the e pawn. I'm relaxed. And we, of course, prepare to castle long and go h4, h5. c5 actually happens to be one of the best lines. This is a gambit. This is a pawn sacrifice. And taking the pawn is possible, but it leads to some wild complications. Black is actually fine here. I'm not going to delve into the detail. Just trust me. This is fine for black. That's why we left this alone. And c takes d4 was, I would say, a pretty serious inaccuracy. The reason it is an inaccuracy is because it allows us to get this kind of Morozzi bind. It releases the tension. And instead of this, knight c6 would have kept the tension and applied pressure on the d-pawn. And the thing is that if we go d5, where can this knight now migrate to? And I've told you guys this logical thinking many times. When a pawn advances in the center, the immediate question you want to ask yourself, which squares are now weakened? It's e5, yeah. It's e5. Well, knight d4 would blunder the pawn, right? 1, 2, 3, I would just take it twice. So knight e5 would be the move, attacking the pawn. Now the theory goes knight c1, and black can strike in the center with e6. This is kind of a Benoni-style way of playing. There is a lot of theory here. Welcome in. There's a lot of theory here. So we're not going to delve into this. But c takes d4 gives us a pretty easy life, I would say. Knight takes d4, queen d2. And here we decided to castle long. If he had gone bishop d7, we would have probably gone bishop e2 and castled short, which would result in kind of a Morozzi bind-like position that we've had actually with the black side, because we played the accelerated dragon. Sorry. But rook e8 is kind of a waste of time, so we castle long, and we begin the attack h4, and now king b1. So does this move make sense to everybody? I want the idea behind king b1 to make sense. Is it absolutely necessary to play this move? Could we have also considered h5? Absolutely. This is a judgment call. This isn't like an obligatory move, but it's a good idea to play this if you do have the time for it, because you might be thankful later. Also, if the attack, fails and you screw up, you might have that insurance of having the king on a safer square, which would buy you more time later in the game. Yeah, that's sad. So now we go h5, sacrificing the pawn. And here was the critical moment in the game. Why not knight b3? That would have also been good, by the way. I considered it. Queen b4, though, would have been a little bit pesky. And you can't go a3 because you blunder the knight. So I was slightly concerned about this. Now, why couldn't we play g4? Well, the problem here is knight g3, as I explained, attacking the rook. And if the rook moves away, then black takes the bishop. And you might look at this and say, well, what's the big deal? We give up the bishop. No, NBD, no big deal. But the problem isn't actually that black has taken the bishop. What is the problem in this position? I'm looking here for a very subtle observation, actually. I'm looking for a subtle observation about the way that white has rearranged his position. Now, first of all, c4 is very weak, and black can attack this. But there's another observation. Yes, Metropolitan, I'd give you a sub for that. Queen can't be in front of the rook, okay? And in this position, it's very important for the queen to lead the attack, because if you have it the other way around, it's not that this isn't strong, but this isn't checkmate. And it'll take you a while. You have to get another rook to the h-file, then you're going to have to move the first rook away. This is a lot more cumbersome than having the queen in front, as we saw. So this move knight g3 really shakes things up on the king side, and not in a good way. That's why we go knight b3 first of all. Thank you, Aquila, gifting to Metropolitan. And now after queen e5, we go g4, using the queen in order to force him to give up the knight for the bishop. Okay? So rook d takes f1, and now queen h2, repositioning the queen. Why didn't he take your rook? Because then he loses his queen, right? We attack his queen and his knight. This is a fork. So we would have won his queen, and then we would have come back around for the knight. Black did have a way to stave off checkmate, and he could have done that by playing h5, forcing white to get a pawn on the h-file. But this pawn is not going to remain there for very long. We're just going to take on g6, and because black hasn't even gotten the engine started on the queen side, there's no doubt in my mind that this would result in checkmate. Okay? Yeah, knight a5 is also a pretty good move. That's also a theoretical line. So, no, that's just the cars. How could black have defended from mate? So this is the way to stave it off, but not for very long. So any questions about the way in which we conducted this attack? I mean, I can show you guys, just by a chess-based search, a million games where the attack succeeded precisely in this way, in the same-ish. It's incredibly common to have an attack end with checkmate along the h-file precisely in this manner. Let me actually do a little search and see what I can find. Isn't rook e8 good because in case... Yeah, so that's Tranquility. That's the idea, but it's simply too slow. And in the Dragon, by the way, that's another opening in which you often get this kind of attack. So here's a good example. One moment. Just looking. Well, here's a moment from a game of Julio Sedora, Grandmaster from Dallas, Texas. Watch what he does. So let me reposition this to a chess-based scene. Basically, we join in a Samish. This is a Samish. Julio Sedora against Tyler Hughes, strong player. And watch what Julio does in this position. So he buys himself some time. Here's bishop h6 trying to trade the bishop. Black dips his bishop away to h8. And now Julio, after taking the pawn, orchestrates a very strong maneuver. What is White's ultimate goal in this position? What does White want to achieve? Ultimately, like what is on White's wish list? And if you paid attention to my game, you would know what particular thing I'm referring to. Check. Ooh, thank you. Well, how do we get mate? What will be necessary? Queen in front of the rook, so we want the queen on h2. Now watch what Julio does. Bishop c4, paving the way for the queen. But he doesn't go immediately to h2. First, he clears the path by moving the bishop away. Now, he still doesn't go queen h2. He's a little bit worried about this knight getting loose. So he moves the knight away, sacrificing the other knight, and now he goes queen h2. And after rook e6, how does White deliver checkmate? By force in a couple of moves. White to play and deliver checkmate. I'm going to grab my coffee as you guys are thinking. This concept pattern recognition is thrown out a lot. This is what pattern recognition is. Mark Dvoretsky, the famous chess trainer, even recommended for his students to have a notebook where they literally wrote down all of these patterns. They would cut out diagrams and glue them into the notebook. And this would be a collection of tactical themes. This is one such theme. This is how you get better at attacking in your openings, by learning concepts like these. Now you guys will not forget this idea of trading bishops, the queen on h7. If black had gone king e8, that would have been nominally more resilient, but I guess bishop takes b5 would have happened. And now we transform the advantage and win the queen. Black decided to just let Julio give checkmate. No, no. He saw this. He was just being graceful, allowing Julio to checkmate him. Of course he saw this. Tyler is a very strong player, actually. Okay, so let's play e4 this time, showcasing the whole range of repertoire. And this time, well, let's continue playing. Shall we continue playing the Alapin, or shall we switch things up a little bit? Let's switch things up. Let's play the Open Sicilian. Let's play the Open Sicilian. We've been playing the Alapin mostly, but I'm sensitive to... Actually, no. Let's play the Moscow. And this is a line which flies under the radar. It causes a lot of people to roll their eyes, but it's actually very venomous. And take my word for this. Bishop b5 check. This is called the Moscow variation. Okay. So now we castle. And the Moscow variation is sort of like a Morozzi bind against d6. Morozzi bind, of course, is mostly played against the accelerator. He goes queen takes d7. Now, yeah, we definitely will. So what is the perk of what we're doing? We have not yet put a knight on c3. Everybody sees that, right? How can we use that to our advantage? Why is it a good thing that we haven't put our knight on c3 yet? What move will we be able to play? So we can play c3, d4, but in the spirit of the Morozzi bind, we can also play c4 and grab more of the center. But first we're going to play d4. Thank you, Riverette. First we're going to play d4. Now we're going to capture with our queen, and now we're finally ready to play c4 and clamp down on the center. The queen can slide back to d3, protecting both of these pawns. And our plan in such a position is going to be very clearly defined. We've talked about this scenario many, many times. What is White's plan here? What square do we want to access, and how do we access it? This is the Smyslov idea. I've shown you that Smyslov game many times. So this particular stock idea should be very obvious. But do we go knight d5 immediately? Do we go knight d5 immediately? How do we get a knight there so that it's not captured? You guys are pointing to the right square, but we have to do something for bingo. Bishop g5, good job. Bishop g5, then we take the knight, then we put our knight on d5. That is like the classic plan. And we don't have to rush with bishop f6. That's another mistake that people make, rushing. If the knight leaves, then he does our job for us, right? We can just put our knight on d5. So one good thing that we can do to increase the pressure is to put the rook on d1, so that once we take on f6, we can potentially also win the pawn on d6. Okay, but let's first attend to what he's doing. So he's putting the queen on the c file. What I think he wants to do maybe is go bishop e6, So a good idea here would be to do what? How do we, like, basically tell him this queen ain't the boss? This queen is not the boss. Whoa! Bartholomew with a raid. Thank you, John. Hey, guys. We go rook AC1. Now, we've talked at several points. We're doing the speedrun. You guys come at a great time. Thank you, guys. Lost today. Painful game, but trying to recover by doing some speedrun, and really appreciate everybody's support. Reptilius, thank you for the sub. Okay. So now we can complete our plan. Bishop takes f6. But here's the thing. This is what I just said. We don't have to rush with this move. And actually, in many ways, it's much more painful to the opponent when we twist the knife in without actually playing the move. The threat is stronger than its execution. So let's improve our position to the maximum first. Let's see how he defends. And then, okay, so bishop g4 is a really good move. Let's chase the bishop away. Yeah, so that's a typical mistake. He thinks that he's won a pawn. He has won a pawn. But what has he not foreseen? Guess what, ladies and gentlemen? We put a rook on c1. There was a reason we did that. Okay. Now, this is where things get a little bit tactical. We have a beautiful move here. Here's the thing. If we move our rook up to c2, what's the problem? The problem is that he goes queen takes c4. And our rook is undefended, which means we cannot move the knight from c3. But what we can do, we notice that the queen and the king are on forkable squares. Programmed to win. Thank you. Knight d5. He cannot capture the rook because of the fork. Tactics like these is why you want to solve consistently, to see stuff like this. How do you see this? Well, it's the fact that the queen and the king are on a forkable square and you have a knight. Those factors should set the metal detector off if it's programmed well. Now we can move the rook away. Now, what is our plan going to be here? There's several ways that we can go about twisting the knife in further. Because I'm feeling pretty aggressive. Okay, so he kind of does our work for us. f5 is just a blunder. We're just going to take that. I mean, e4 is not dangerous at all. We're just going to move our queen away. He has no play. And look at our beautiful knight here. That knight is supervising the entire board. It is dominating everything, and he is in no position to be opening the position up. He's literally doing our work for us. Okay, what should we do? What should we do here? Should we take on f6? No. What should we do? Where should we move the rook? Bingo. We're threatening. Oh, and now we have a sexy move. Now we have a move that will be on everyone's Tinder bio. f6, interception tactic. f6 and intercepting. Ooh. Oh, this guy is going to pay in blood. Fossilism the juicer. What should we do now? Let's twist in that knife. Think of it this way. What weaknesses does this move create? Let's think logically. Okay? It creates a weakness on the g6 square. Now, we can play knight e7 and win a bunch of material, but more elegant would be to play this move. Trying to get to g6. Here's my point, guys. The knight is so strong that it's actually not even worth giving the knight up for an exchange. Knight e7 would probably be even the best move objectively, but I want to emphasize that it's not all about material. Outposts are so frickin' strong that sometimes we want to keep them even in the face of the possibility of winning material. If he takes our rook, we checkmate him on g7, fossilize him. Queen f5 is fine, yeah, but king h7, we have rook takes g5. And because of the pin, our rook gets into the attack. The game is over. Well, as I explained, so if he goes king h7, queen f5 would be equivalent. We have rook takes g5. And if he takes, well, he can't take. Okay. And now we don't need to give a check. A lot of people here I know are tempted with a check. Don't give the check because he covers up with his bishop. Instead, keep your eyes on the prize. We take the pawn. The point is not to win a pawn. The point is that the g5 pawn is going to be our access point to his king. And we've now ensured that that pawn has no other pawn defenders. Now it's going to be easier to win. It's going to be easier to win. Rook takes g5, pin, and win. Thank you. One good shirt. Appreciate the tier 1. So, very thematic attack. We're not doing anything crazy. We're just involving our pieces. And I want to make it clear that many roads lead to Athens, as Peter likes to say. Many roads lead to Rome. When you're attacking, there isn't only one method in many positions. Sometimes there's going to be plenty of methods. Now, finally, we've set the table. We've made all of the necessary improvements. Let's now actually focus on winning material. Let's go knight f6 check. Okay, why do I do this now and not before? Because now we've basically, we've completely disrobed his king, and we can transform our advantage by just taking a million pawns. F. Okay, sorry. I'm correcting it, guys. I'm correcting it. I got it. I'm correcting it. Okay. There we go. It's a funny effect when once I say it, okay, so queen d5 trades queens, and I'm just going to show you guys what happened in the last couple of games, couple of moves. People were following it in their head, I think. Okay, so now we're just going to win by pushing this pawn forward. Paul's daddy, thank you for the prime. And d7. And now rook f5, pinning bishop. We're going to take on f6 and promote with d8 queen. Yeah, guys, I do see when people say froze. The moment the board is frozen, I immediately reset it. Now, this last part of the game, we played knight f6 check, winning the exchange. Of course, remember, he's pinned. And then we simply took his pawn, forced the queen trade, and won the endgame. Very simple game. We didn't do anything extraordinary. This is the Moscow variation. And the way that he played it, we go d4. Now, why don't we go c4 immediately? Who can tell me why it's important to play d4 first? What is the drawback of playing c4? What can black now do to prevent us from expanding in the center? Well, black can play this annoying move e5. And we get this pair of weak squares on d5. This is a reasonable structure. Thank you, Paul's daddy gifting to Alex Dora. But it's not what I wanted. I want the Morozzi bind. And we get it. And if you're black here, you need to immediately try to chip away at white's bind. Right? You can't allow you cannot allow white to expand fully, to develop fully. That's exactly what happened in the game. You saw the result. So what should black do here to chip away at white's bind? And this is theory, by the way. This is the only way, I think, for black to equalize, and that's the move b5. If you play the Sicilian, these moves need to be second nature. You need to be able to play these moves relatively automatically. And I actually can retain the pawn by playing b3. I know some of you guys are thinking of that, like, what's the issue? But first of all, black's bishop gets a nice development square. And second of all, if black trades on c4, this pawn becomes isolated. And this pawn can be accessed via the c-file. So black at least gets some active chances in relation to white's pawns on c4 and e4. You see what I'm saying? Well, no, queen takes would not be very good because that would walk into like something like d5. And white does want to keep the bind. So I would still do this, but the position would be double-edged. Now again, I cannot emphasize this game enough, guys. I've shown you many, many times Smyslov against Rudakovsky. This game is shown to Russian school children when they're still in their mother's womb. And there's a very good reason for that, because this is one of the most typical positional plans known to man. And it never gets old because of how important it is, how ubiquitous and transferable it is to so many different types of positions. This is literally, I mean, I've known this game for I don't know how long. And I've shown it to all my students. I've shown it many, many times. And as stale as it is, there's a reason why it's stale. This is this game. Smyslov Rudakovsky, 1945. What did white do in this position? Somebody remind me. White does not go knight d5, right? White goes bishop g5, takes the knight, and puts a knight on d5. This is the typical method of establishing a knight in the outpost. This has been done to me many, many times. Even in my own chess career, I have been the recipient. I have been on the receiving end of this plan. So transferring this back to the speedrun, we literally do the exact same thing, bishop g5. But there's one difference. We don't need to rush with bishop takes f6, right? The knight's not going anywhere. It is literally pinned. So we first make an improvement to the position by x-raying his queen. And only after he plays h6, wasting time. Sorry. 1 second. So rook fd1, bringing our other rook into the game. Bishop g4. Now, basically here, there were a couple of tactical moments. We could have gone knight d5. But instead, I decided to get his bishop to move. He takes on f3 thinking, I won the pawn. But that's why we put the rook on c1. We go knight d5. That's actually similar to what Smyslov did. It's frozen. No, it's not. And the fact of the matter is, if he takes on a2, we transfer the attack, right? We now give up our knight, but we're simply going to checkmate him very easily. That's another thing I want people to notice. People tend to fall in love with their pieces. When we have a knight and an outpost, that knight can be used as a bargaining chip, right? You can use that knight and give it away for the greater good. Just because it's a beautiful knight doesn't mean you want to keep it there forever. There are things that will require you to give this knight away. That's fundamentally why I put it there. Chess is a game where you have to learn how to transform your advantages. And now knight d5 is the key move. Knight d5 is a small tactic. If bishop takes c1, we win the queen. Right? And now we get space for our rook to move, and the pawn is no longer attacked, and f5 was just panic. Doesn't the queen take the c2? Yeah, but white has a fork on c7. So what is an outpost? I think there's formal definitions, but I like to think of it informally. An outpost is a square. Now, I would say statistically mostly occupied by knight, but an outpost can be for any piece, even a pawn. And usually it's in the enemy territory. So think of this part of the board. An outpost is a square in this territory where a piece is supported by your pawns. And to my eye, the main defining factor of an outpost, the piece has to be unassailable, which is to say no opposing pawn can chase away that piece. All right? No opposing pawn can chase away that piece. So if you were to reposition black's pawn to e7, if you were to reposition it from e5 to e7, this would no longer be considered an outpost because black would play e6 and chase away the knight. That is what I would call the defining factor here. That's why the knight is so good. In Russian, they call it the eternal knight. Now, he panics and gives away the pawn and loses quickly. What would have been our plan had he not done that? Well, what I would propose is to double on the g file and then dislodge the bishop with g4 when the attack on the g7 pawn would have been completely unstoppable. Okay? Outpost target a large area. Well, yeah. Can you have a bad outpost? Yes, you can have a Вечный конь. Вечный конь. You can have a bad outpost. Not all outposts are good, but I think the connotation of an outpost is that it is good, right? You could invent a bad outpost, but if you're talking about outpost, that usually means you're proud of that piece. Yes. So I would consider it an outpost even if the bishop could assail the knight. That's still an outpost. I would say that it's the litmus test is whether a pawn can chase away the outpost. No, black is basically busted here because of the knight. I've lost many games like this. I have been in many situations like this with the black pieces, and it's not fun. Naroditsky once beat me precisely in a position like this, crushed me on the king side, on the g file actually, in a game that was eerily reminiscent of how we beat this guy. The problem is when you get a knight like that on d5, no matter who you are, whether you're a GM or what your rating is, you lose without a fight because it's so hard to manufacture chances. So if you take a look at the following position, yeah, so this is from my game against Naroditsky. You guys can see the similarities are eerie. Knight on d5, outpost, and he crushes me here because black has absolutely no play. I'm just going to run through the game. Gata runs his pawn up to b6, and what he basically does is he gives up that knight. You see what I said earlier? In precisely the way that I described. He gives it up in order to ruin my kingside pawn structure, and the advantage transforms from a positional one to a tactical one. The knight has given itself up to open the g-file, and now, fittingly, the game ends when he gets his rook to the g-file. Unstoppable. Right? So this is exactly what I mean when I say transform the advantage. There's more to talk about and unpack here, but I want to move on. Let's get the next game rolling. What is it about outposts that make them so strong? Yeah, it's mostly about the cramping. And also, control. Don't overthink it. We're just controlling a million squares. The knight in the center controls 8 squares mathematically, but it exerts its pressure over essentially all parts of the board. Okay? So let's move on. Next game. Hope you guys are enjoying. The games have become more complicated, but my hope is that, trying to make this understandable still even to beginners.